James Kaufman, World News Report today. Ladies and gentlemen, today I'm going to attempt to prove to you that we have another source of light or energy in our solar system. I believe it to be a binary brown dwarf in the infrared spectrum, thus we're unable to see it. I'm going to show y'all why we're unable to see it and how I know it's there. Let's go into this. First off, these are protons hitting core 1 yesterday. How do I know they're protons? Well, I'll show you in just a moment, but they came from this blast right here. And that was a huge flare, probably a very large X flare coming from the sunspot group that should be around the limb today and named. Again, those were protons hitting core 1. Real quickly, we'll go into how we know that. So as y'all might know, we had two very strong, what they called M-class solar flares from an unnamed eclipsed sunspot group, eclipsed by the incoming limb of our sun yesterday. They were probably much stronger than M-class, probably strong X-class solar flares from the same sunspot group that released the halo explosion the day before. Well, what happened? Our proton count started moving up. And this goes proton flux. Everyone knows how big of a hit we have to take to move that proton count up, especially if it's not even Earth-facing. All right, last night was what we call our new moon. That's where the moon is invisible because it actually gets between the sun and Earth, and all of the sunlight hits the sun-facing side of the moon, leaving the Earth-facing side of the moon black. And I'll prove to y'all last night at 2:06 was our new moon for the month. You can see it turned black here, as a matter of fact. And that would be exactly what it's supposed to do last night, as I will prove to y'all. Now, what's crazy here is we have a secondary source of energy that comes into play and lights up our moon here. I'll show you that secondary source of energy. At first, I thought this was the moon that we were seeing, but it turns out that there is something much larger up close and personal to Earth. Now, y'all must know that 85% of all solar systems that we can see with our telescopes, and that's our James Webb infrared and ultraviolet telescope, are binary or trinary systems or more stars than that. Stars are created in pairs. Now, I do believe that this is probably a burned out star, a brown dwarf perhaps, in the infrared spectrum, or we'd be able to see it on our doorstep, as it must be on our doorstep. Now, there's no way that during a new moon, it's supposed to be black, as I will show y'all, it could be lit up unless there was a source of light coming from Earth or behind Earth or in between Earth and the moon. And then you actually see one go by here. Now, let me see if I can, there it is going by. And here's the moon coming out, still illuminated. It should be black. The sun is this small circle right here in white. And this is the, lens cover to protect the actual lenses from any large explosions from our sun. So we shouldn't be able to see the moon at all right now. But we are able to because it's being illuminated by that source of light that should not be there. Let me show y'all what I mean. All right, these are our monthly moon phases. Sunlight coming from this direction. This is exactly what is going on. This is what we see here. So obviously the sun is illuminating the back side of the moon, a new moon. And what we see is this. This is what's occurring. Here, the sun is illuminating this portion of the moon. What we see is a waxing crescent moon. And obviously this is 28.5 days for the moon to actually make it around Earth. Just FYI. And last night at 2:06 was our new moon, which means we should only be able to see black. Now let me prove that to you as well. When is August 2025's new moon? Well, it was last night, Saturday, August 23rd at 2:06 a.m. Eastern Time. Right? That would be 1:06 Central Time here in the U.S. And the moon would be invisible to us. Invisible. Here's another story by NPR. A black moon will appear in the sky this weekend, but you won't be able to see it. Here's why. Well, guys, we saw it. That's a problem. Now, to further understand, we must realize that humans can only see 0.0035% or 3.5 one-thousandths of 1% of the light spectrum. We refer to that as the visible light spectrum. They've made it very large here to make it easy to see. You can move in one direction and you move into the ultraviolet range, which some animals can see further into the ultraviolet than we can, but we're stuck in this small 3.5 one-thousandths of 1% of this light spectrum here. If we move in the other direction, we're into the infrared. The infrared part of the light spectrum. All right? So humans can't see into the ultraviolet spectrum or any of the infrared spectrum. Although instruments like our James Hubble spacecraft can see further into both spectrums. Now, y'all also need to realize that out of the millions of solar systems that we've examined, over 85% of them that exist are binary star systems or have 3 or more stars. Okay, that's very important. That means that we have at least an 85% chance of having a binary star in this system, right? What else do y'all need to know? Core 19, Core 1 is our very latest and greatest. And there comes the moon. And here it goes dark like it's supposed to because the sun is behind it. But then all of a sudden, it lights up and you can see it. Which again means that there's a secondary source of energy, either in between the moon and Earth, which I doubt, or perhaps even behind Earth. And this pretty much proves it. You can actually see it right here, which would push us into the direction that is in between the moon and Earth, which is crazy to think. It could be that up close and personal. And if it's in the infrared spectrum, which I believe it to be, a brown dwarf would be in the infrared spectrum, then we would not be able to see this at all. Something lit up that moon when it was supposed to be black all night long during the quote-unquote new moon, period. Now, when most people think of binary systems, they think of something like this. Something that's perfect. And these stars might not see each other for, millions of years if they both end up, depending on their speeds, on the backside of their orbits at any given time. They'd only see each other if they came close during the times that, They went around the center mass, is what it's called, of that binary or trinary system. Well, this is just one example of a binary system. There's thousands of ways a binary system can work. We can even have one perpendicular or horizontal. This is the actual structure of a solar system with 6 stars in it. And you can see that, well, everything has its central mass system. This and this do, this and this do, this orbit and this do, this orbit and this does as well. But there's 6 different stars in this one system. Now the chances that we have 2 are huge. I believe that 85% is, well, let's just say I believe that it's closer to 100% that stars are created in pairs. All right, these are the 7 types of stars besides failed stars that exist. Y'all will never guess which one our sun is. It's a yellow dwarf star. Not a red supergiant, not a red giant star. It's a yellow dwarf star. And we see over here the brown dwarf star. Well, that is in the infrared spectrum and only seen through an infrared scope or in that spectrum. Although it's still emitting light in that infrared spectrum. Or there are stars that emit radiation mainly in the infrared and visible to humans. Well, brown dwarfs do. It says it right here, guys. Basically, all of their light is in the infrared spectrum, invisible completely to humans. Now, the light spectrum or electromagnetic spectrum, same thing, is this, well, everything's made up of light. This is the visible light spectrum, or the 3.51 of 1% that humans can see. Well, our James Webb telescope could see pretty far into the infrared spectrum here, as you can see. Our Hubble could see slightly into the ultraviolet spectrum and slightly into the infrared spectrum. We have something called our Spitzer Space Telescope. They can see even further into the infrared spectrum. They use radio telescopes for these types of vision. I don't think this really matters, but the further you move into the infrared spectrum, the longer the wavelengths, and the further you move into the ultraviolet spectrum, the tighter or shorter the wavelengths, as you can see. And I don't think this matters either, but very, very deadly. Radio waves are not so deadly. Obviously, microwaves are. So I'm sure you can realize, depending on speeds, these stars can make it around their binary system and never come close to each other, except for once in a while. It's very, very possible. And if one of them is a brown dwarf, like this one appears to be here, you come very close to it in an orbit like this, or any orbit really, and not be able to visually see the star if you're a human and can only see in the visible light spectrum. Back to the huge problem that our new Core 1 that sees in the infrared spectrum has brought to me here. There's the huge explosion from the sunspot group that should be named. And these are the protons. The explosion actually happened while it was behind the disk there. Remember, the sun is this very small area here. And that's why you're seeing the protons hit immediately before you see the plasma come out from behind the opaque Well, cover is what they call it. All right, and then we have the real problem here. We have the moon moving into picture. Now, I was sure that what we were seeing on the bottom of Core 1 yesterday must be the moon, but when the moon moved into picture, it made everything perfect. And you can see the moon doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. It's a new moon, so all the sun's going to be hitting it from behind. It's going to disappear as far as we can see, although it's still there. The problem with this, of course, is it disappears, but then we have another light source that comes into play, and we can see it coming into play in this area here. If I can get back there. And I'll move this across so y'all can see it down here. It's this huge item right here, okay? It illuminates the moon, which the moon should not be illuminated. The sun's behind it. Now, we also have a relic here. Right here. You can see it come around through here. Now, what are my problems with this? Well, I've got a problem. My problem is where does the light go? Now, there's a chance that this could be a very small brown dwarf, which regularly they are, or failed star. They could somehow be eclipsed by Earth, although Earth's fairly small itself, right? It would have to be really, really close, but we can see that the light source is on the solar side here with Core 1. So could this be a man-made sun that was switched on and switched off? That's the only other thing we could be talking here. But, in fact, our new moon, it's supposed to be black, actually was illuminated. And this source continues every 12 hours. For 1 hour, this source goes by, if you will. And this has continued for, well, since the 15th. And that's how I knew there was a problem, because on the 15th, the moon was at a 90-degree angle from the sun, and there's no way that we could have seen the moon. And I will show you on the 15th when I filmed that secondary source of energy, which again, the only other thing it could be was a, well, man-made object, which is very possible these days. Now, you can go back to the 15th and see that I was able to film that same light source, and you can see that the moon is at a 9-degree angle here, and the sun is in this direction. So it wasn't the moon that we were viewing, and that's what made me look into this much harder. Again, I don't understand why we only see this illumination for about an hour every 12 hours. That's from about 4 UTC time. And we can add 12 to that, 16 UTC time, till about 5:30. So about an hour and a half of that every 12 hours is what we're seeing. Again, it was also filmed on the 15th here, where it couldn't have been the moon. The last question I'm left with, you can see the 4:15 into the 5:30, really till 6. So about 2 hours, really. I don't understand why we get 2 hours of illumination and then a break in illumination, although really the moon is still being illuminated. You can see it here. Shouldn't be able to see it at all. So there is some light still hitting it, but it's being eclipsed by something. Again, this could be the Earth, and it could be orbiting the Earth, or this could be a man-made situation and not a brown dwarf or binary star at all. But we do know there's a huge problem in the heavens and lots of questions. With that said, guys, I'll leave it up to you guys. God bless. Share, subscribe, and always remember, anything's possible. Bizarro world.